Well, welcome to Tim's Take, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Temple Grandin from the University of Colorado State.
It's Colorado State University.
It's Colorado State University. That's right. And you are semi-retired.
No, I'm not really. No, I'm not retired yet, but I'm still a professor of animal science at Colorado State University. No, I've been half-time there for years.
Sure.
So I could spend the other half of my time consulting and doing other things.
Because you still have graduate students. You mentioned several times.
Yep.
Well, you were here at the University of Missouri talking about livestock handling and the proper ways of doing that. You've also, in the past, have designed livestock facilities.
That's correct, yes.
And you didn't get a lot into that today. It's more about how we should interact with the animals.
Well, you need to have decent facilities. But as I get older, I'm getting more and more into the management side of it. One of the mistakes I made when I was in my 20s, and a lot of engineering people make this mistake, they think they can build a self-managing farm or a cattle handling facility. No, you can't. You have to have the stockmanship and the management to go along with it. And today in my talk, I talked about the basics. We still have to stop people from screaming at cattle, hitting them. I'm constantly using electric prods. Mm-hmm. First thing that people have to do is to calm down. Now, overall, in all the years I've been in this, cattle handling's improved. The percentage of places with good cattle handling has increased. I would estimate on ranches it's probably 70 or 80%, where 40 years ago it might have been 10 or 20%. Mm-hmm. So the percentage is much, much better. There's been lots of handling workshops. That is good. But we have a lot of new people coming in, and we still have to go over the basics. And I was just talking to people at the meeting today, and there was an auction where there's too much yelling and screaming and hitting. And this basically gets down to management has to decide they're going to stop that. Management's got to get behind having good cattle handling. Say, okay, we're going to stop yelling at cattle and stop hitting them. You got to calm down. That's the first thing that you've got to do.
We've got to calm down.
People have to calm down. Mm-hmm. And then I showed them a very simple movement where to get cattle to go forward in a chute. This is one of the really good ways to get rid of electric prods or drastically reduce their use. To get an animal into the squeeze chute, you quickly walk forward into the flight zone and then walk back by it, past the point of balance.
And the flight zone is what?
Flight zone is like if you go out in the pasture of cattle and they start to move away, you've entered the flight zone.
Their realm.
Now the size.
The fight or flight zone.
No, the flight zone size is based on genetics, more excitable cattle have a bigger flight zone, amount of contact with people, and the quality of the contact with people. Animals that are handled quietly will have a much smaller flight zone. So the easy way to get an animal into let's just pretend one of these books is a squeeze chute. Right. Since you do have some TV here, let's pretend that's the squeeze chute.
All right.
And let's say cattle lined up here and I want to get him in here. You step forward, quickly walk back by them like that in the opposite direction.
And they won't scare them.
Well, when you cross the shoulder, they'll go forward. Now, if I just walk really slowly back, they'll just back up on me. Now, this is really counterintuitive, but this is one of the ways to get rid of a lot of excessive force at the entrance to a squeeze chute. You stand outside the flight zone, quickly walk forward, and then walk back quickly past them. Mm-hmm. And that will often make the animal go into the squeeze chute. I found that was one of the secrets to greatly reducing electric prod use at the entrance to squeeze chutes.
Because you said it takes 20 to 30 minutes for them to calm back down once they get excited.
That's right. We had horses scared recently by a news photographer with a drone, and it was very stupid what they did and really dangerous what they did. They took the drone and they came in like a plane coming in for a landing right at the horses, and they were terrified and they were rearing and wow. I timed it. It took 20 minutes for them to become rideable.
And they still weren't going to ever like that drone now.
This was a very stupid, dangerous thing. Now, if you take a drone and kind of park it up in the air, they'll ignore that.
Mm-hmm. Then could you gradually, over time,
we got back. Yeah, you probably could. It's really important that an animal's first experience with something new, like a new person, a new corral, a horse trailer, be a good first experience. Because if the first experience with something new is completely bad, they may stay afraid of that four-wheeler that you frighten them with, stay afraid of the horse trailer. If you have a new handling facility, I think it'd be a very good idea to feed them in it first.
Sure.
Make that initial experience with that handling facility good. Because bad first experiences are really bad. I talked to a lady just today, and when her horse was asleep, the vet walked up and stuck an injection in its neck, and it freaked out. It was not a smart thing to do. Now when it sees that veterinarian or any veterinarian, it's freaking out.
Because in that horse's mind, the picture it has is a veterinarian.
Yeah, that was not a good thing to do. It was a really gentle horse, and now it's terrified of getting injections.
Sure.
So I suggested maybe try doing the vaccine somewhere else, and you give the shot very carefully. That might work. You see, because it's like a picture. And sometimes if you can change the picture enough, it's almost like opening a new file folder in the animal's brain. Mm-hmm. I've seen this with bits. You have horses when they're training abused with a snaffle, which is jointed because that's the beginner bit. And then any jointed bit's bad. And I've seen those get fixed when you put a one-piece bar that's going to feel different, and then the horse calms right down. It's like a new file folder. So I'd have the students hold the different bits to think of them as feeling pictures.
Sure. Now, when you talk about them getting riled up, you mentioned a lot of times when they were at going to processing plants.
Well, processing plants have really improved their handling.
Yes, because that probably affects the quality of the meat.
It does. You're going to get bruises. Mm-hmm. And I designed a lot of equipment for processing plants. I had a piece of equipment called the center track restrainer system. All the big plants have got that now. I worked on developing that, it was about 30 years ago. And one of the problems I had is getting people to operate it correctly. And then in 1999, I was hired by McDonald's to implement animal welfare auditing. And I developed a very simple scoring system for assessing slaughter plants. 5 simple measures. When you hang it on the rail, it better be unconscious or you fail, period. 95% unconscious on the first shot. And when I first started, only 30% of the plants could do this because the equipment was broken.
Oh, my goodness.
Broken. Electric prod score was horrible. Falling down was horrible. Slippery floors. Vocalization around the stunning box was horrible. And they knew what they had to do. Something as simple as a head restrainer that squeezed the neck too tight, you get 23% vocalization, and loosen it, went down to 0%. And the good news is out of the 74 suppliers on the McDonald's approved supplier list, only 3 had to buy expensive equipment. Now, I had a lot of equipment in those plants, and they had to repair a bunch of stuff. They did a lot of repairs. But it got down to management. And then in 3 plants, the plant manager was removed. Oh, and then things immediately improved. Management has to get behind handling cattle right.
So these restaurants, and you mentioned a few of them, was this consumer-driven that we want our animals to be humanely treated?
Well, why did McDonald's look at this?
Yes.
Well, there was a case called McLipel that was in the mid-'90s where an environmental group in England put a pamphlet out basically saying McDonald's is terrible, destroys the rainforest, tortures animals, everything terrible. And McDonald's sued them, and the environmental group won part of the lawsuit. And now they were forced to look at it. This is back around 97 or so. And I was hired to take them on the first trips to farms and slaughter plants. And it was just like that show Undercover Boss. Uh-huh. I'll never forget the day when the McDonald's executive saw a half-dead dairy cow go into their product. It was like, oh, there's things here we do have to work on. And in fact, Bob Langert, the person who hired me, has a book called The Battle to Do Good, where he discusses this. And I was hired to train their food safety auditors on the really simple scoring system that I'd done for the American Meat Institute. And very quickly, a few months later, Wendy's got on board, then Burger King. So you had all 3 companies enforcing the same very simple scoring system. They knew exactly what they had to do to make their numbers. Vocalization had to be no more than 3% of the cattle in the stunning area. And I saw more change in about 6 months than I'd seen in my whole career. And most of the change was management, training, non-slip flooring going in, repairs of equipment, repairs of stunners, lots of repairs. Maybe change something with the lighting, maybe put a solid side up so they don't see people walk by, just very, very simple things. And then the American media started having an animal care and handling conference. And it was amazing how good some of the plants have got. And they're handling right now, most of those big plants, some of it's really good.
And talking about light, you mentioned they don't want to go into a dark building.
They don't want to go in the dark. You've got to avoid what I call the dark movie theater effect. So if you have your handling facility, your squeeze chute and the lead up in the crowd pen inside a building, it may work just fine at night because you can light it up at night or on a cloudy day. But on a real sunny day, that building is like a dark movie theater and they don't want to go in. And what you'd have to do to fix that is put in some white translucent panels on the other side so they can see light, or maybe open up some other doors. But if they can't see daylight through the building on a sunny day, they're not going to want to enter the building.
Sure. And you mentioned covering the outside walls because they get distracted if they see
the main thing
people walking
you
by.
want to cover the outer perimeter, so when everybody parks the pickups along there, they don't see that.
Or people walking by because
that's bad.
That gets them nervous.
Well, it just stops them. First thing you want to do, make sure you have non-slip flooring, and then remove distractions. One of my students, Dennis Wilson, did a study in a small meat plant, and when it was a cloudy day, their facility worked great because there were no sharp shadows. But then on sunny days, you get a lot of sharp shadows, and then the amount of yelling that people did and electric prod use went up because the sharp shadows cast by the fences were making the cattle stop and refusing to move. Another distraction this plant had was a very noisy rendering truck, and they'd pick a big dumpster up and clang it all around. It was more difficult to move the cattle.
Is sale barns then probably seems like there's more noise there than normal?
Well, sale barns as a group probably have some of the worst handling because that got brought up today. Some really bad handling at sale barns. And this is where management has to decide that they are going to stop this. And they say, well, we don't have trained people. Let's just start out with basics. No yelling, and get the electric prod out of your hand. It's not your primary driving tool. That's what the big meat packing plants have done. Big meat packing plants banned it for unloading trucks, banned it in the pens. Only they got one electric prod to get them into the stunner restrainer or stun box, and it's only used if the cattle doesn't go in.
It only used once.
Yeah, usually only used once. Well, if you banned it, then you get into really bad tail cranking and hitting. So there's a time when it's better to do one buzz. But you've got to get it out of their hand. And in the auctions, this is where management has to decide they're going to improve handling. Now, I realize they have a lot of casual labor, but you can say, no yelling. No, I went to a really nice beef plant last summer in the UK, and the guy in the yards just would whistle, and every ear goes up like that. You just don't need to do that.
And ear means
now they're getting all alert. And
yes. Yeah.
No, that is not the thing to do. And another really important thing is moving small groups. If you jam your crowd pen full and make them wait, they're going to turn around in there because cattle want to go back to where they come from. So that's something that you don't want to do. And when you really get good at handling, you time your bunches. You wait until there's some space in your single file lead up. Then you bring up a small group, and they go through the crowd pen. I don't care how it's designed at this point, and they go right into the lead up chute. Where what you don't want to do is store a whole bunch of cattle in the crowd pen, just have them turn around on you. That's what you don't want to do. Now, timing your bunches, that's going to take some effort. You need to learn that. And it's a mindset change to not have all the alleyways leading up to the crowd pen just jammed packed with cattle that have turned around in them.
Then you really start making a mess.
Yeah.
So you mentioned 7 at a time.
It depends upon the facility.
With hogs.
Well, that was with hogs. I went during COVID. I consulted by Zoom with a plant in Europe that was handling hogs, and they were trying to bring 20 pigs up at a time to go up a single file chute. It was just a mess. And I said, it's 7. For that particular facility, it would be 7. Now, well, let's look out on a ranch. How many should you bring up? If your lead-up chute is short, it might be 3 adult cows at a time, maybe 5 weaners. Maybe another facility, you could bring up a few more. So it's going to depend partly on the facility. Mm-hmm. But ideally, what you put in the crowd pen should go right into the single file chute that leads up to the squeeze chute. So you have to time the bunches so that that's got space in it. So when you bring up your next batch of cattle, they go right on in.
So that's good for whether you're working cattle or at a sale barn. You probably still want to keep some of these.
Well, the one problem we have in a sale barn is selling singles.
Oh, uh-huh.
And one of the first design projects I ever did was a sale barn. And one of the things I put in it, and it worked really well, was a single file chute for single cattle. What happens in a lot of sale barns, they got groups, and then they're in whips and sticks and everything else, trying to separate single calves at a time and get them in there. It's just a mess. Well, I just made a single file chute with some sliding gates in it, and you could line up the cattle and then just let them into the ring one at a time. It worked beautifully. Now, I think the reason why people haven't put that in is they don't want to spend the money to make the shed a little bigger to put that in there. But it totally solved the problems of people beating up singles trying to keep up with the auction.
Because when you whistle and yell and whip, you just get the whole.
Well, the problem is they just stick together more. You whistle and yell, it just makes the cattle get upset, and they stick together even more. It just makes it worse. I
had a colleague whose farm manager was very good at handling cattle in a calm way, but when he would want to come out, the boss would come out and help. He said it went south fast because he was from a farm that they whistled and yelled and the cattle got nervous and it just didn't work.
We still have to talk about yelling. There was a study done in Texas about 4 years ago at feed yards, and something like 30% of the people were still making too much noise and screaming at cattle. So if it's running an auction, the first thing I got to do is I got to get rid of the yelling and whistling, hitting, and all of this. Get rid of that.
Even hitting, though. How do you describe hitting?
Well, you've got when
the
packing plant rules for the Humane Slaughter Act. It says you must not beat cattle. That's how the Humane Slaughter Act's written. Well, when does tapping an animal with a paddle become beating? So I made a video called Proper Use of Livestock Driving Tools. So when does tapping become beating? Well, you take an empty Amazon box, you tape it all up, you whack it with the paddle, and when it starts to break, tapping has become beating. It's that simple. And then you figure out in each facility the correct groups to bring up. And every facility is going to be somewhat different, but there's no ranch where you're going to stuff 20 cattle up in the crowd pen area to go into the to go in a single file chute. Well, even in the biggest meat packing plant, you bring up about 18.
Okay. And you mentioned dogs. Just keep your dogs out of the corral.
I'm not a fan of dogs in the corral,
yes.
Especially dogs nipping through the side of the chute. Mm-hmm. All it does is teach cattle to kick, and that can get really dangerous. Now, I've seen some very nicely trained dogs work in the field. I've seen Kelpies in Australia do a really, really good job, but around the corrals, it's just trouble.
So what if then, let's change the subject a little bit, if we've got animals that we want to show, and you mentioned a couple of times how once they brought them to the show, the horse or whatever just went berserk. So how do you keep that from happening?
Think about things that are at a show that you don't have at home. Flags, bikes, and balloons. These are 3 things you want to get your animal trained to, horse or steer, before you go to a show. Now, the best way to train them for flags would be to decorate the pasture fence with flags and let your horses and cattle just quietly walk up to them. Because new things are attractive if the animal can voluntarily approach. Scary when you shove them in its face. So just let them approach the different flags. Then I would use maybe 3 types of flags. You've got, like an American flag someone might have on a horse, that type of flag. Then you've got those blade flags, and then pennants, the little pennants. And I take all 3 of those types and put them along a fence and just let your animals just walk up to them. And they learn they're okay. Bicycles are scary because they don't make much noise. So you just set a bike out there, let them come up, explore it, walk it around. Balloons are really erratic. They put some of those on the fence where they're approaching these things. Now, another issue is drones. And if a photographer just takes a drone and parks it up in the air, that's okay. But we had a news photographer at our equine center do really dangerous things with drones. And I was interviewed, and then we went out to ride some horses, and this news photographer terrified them with drones, and they were rearing. They were all tacked up. We were supposed to ride them. I said, we're not going to ride those. Now, I've said for years, it takes 20 minutes for that animal to calm back down. I timed it. It took exactly 20 minutes to calm back down. Then we get on him, and this idiot takes the drone and goes right at us like that. We were lucky we weren't bucked off. Yeah. That was just incredibly stupid. Because actually, if you put drone up in the air and then you very slowly lower it, animals tend to just stare at it. Mm-hmm. Where it's scary is when it goes like that. No, it was incredibly dangerous, incredibly stupid what was done with that drone.
And a lot of the emotions that you're describing are with people, too.
Yes, I talked about the Panskep emotional systems. He's a neuroscientist. And I talked about fear. That's the emotion, like if cattle get upset during handling, that's usually fear. Then you have anger. Okay, the bull comes after you out in the pasture. That's certainly not fear. Then you have separation distress. When you take the calf away from the cow, they get all upset. Mm-hmm. That's a different emotional system than fear, like jumping around in the squeeze chute, or fear of the drone, or fear of flags because they've never seen flags before. Okay. So you have fear and separation distress, and then you have seek. That's the exploration drive. The animal wants to explore. Like some cattle will go out and graze a lot of pasture. This is some work that was done at New Mexico State University. Other cattle, they're lazy, lay around the water hole. So that's the seek or the exploration drive. And there can be genetic differences in this. Then you have sex drive. Then you have mother-young nurturing. You might have a mama cow that protects her calf but doesn't lick it because that's a different emotional system. And then you have play. You've all seen calves jump up and down.
Right.
And that would be play. And those are basic emotional systems in all mammals.
Including us.
Yeah, including us. The main difference is we got a computer sitting up here that's 20 times bigger. That's the main difference.
So, and you just got to realize they don't understand these things. And
well, the thing is that we did an interesting experiment with a children's play set that has a little slide and a swing. And think of it now, if the slide is facing this way, it looks different than facing this way. And what I wanted to show was that when you rotate that play set in the mind of the horse, it became a new thing. And this would explain a lot of the spooking they might sometimes do.
Or where they may not want to walk by something anymore since it's
walking
changed.
By it. Yeah,
yes.
That's right.
Well, you didn't mention taking your jacket off and putting it on the corral.
Well, then the cattle aren't going to want to go through there because the jacket's there.
Yeah, because it's different.
And
it's something that's
just don't put the jacket there. Another one that causes a lot of problems is vehicles parked all along the fence. That's where you do need a solid side. So you don't see that.
One day, my small herd, I saw them all in a circle staring at something out in the pasture. It was a goose.
Yeah.
Because something had invaded their...
Well, you see, we had a bunch of heifers just all in a circle, and it was a muskrat or some other animal like that was out there in the...
Because it's different.
Yeah.
It's not.
But you see, novelty is attractive when they can voluntarily approach. Mm-hmm. Scary if you just shove it in their face.
And that goose probably just landed all of a sudden and
it was just there still.
Yes.
And now if you just sit on a bucket out in the middle of the pasture, they'll probably all come up to you and lick you.
Right.